James Herard wasn't born a monster, but he became something far more disturbing. By 19, people already feared his name on the streets. He was running with crowds that treated violence like sport. At first, it was just robberies. Then it shifted. Random people, late nights, no motive, just bodies. And when investigators finally pulled the curtain back, they realized this wasn't chaos at all. It was competition. A cold body count challenge that turned ordinary places into hunting grounds. This is the story of how James Herard crossed a line most people never even get near. To really understand how everything went left with James Herard, you got to go all the way back to the beginning, and his beginning was already stacked against him. His dad dipped when James was only 5, just walked out. No guidance, no real male presence, just gone. That left James growing up in a house that was already struggling before he even knew what struggle was. His mom was hustling hard just to keep them alive. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Always tired, always stressed, and that stress spilled into the house. Discipline wasn't calm talks or timeouts. It was harsh, painful. At one point, she even burned his fingers trying to stop him from stealing. Stuff like that stays with a kid. Then it got worse. James was sexually abused by a family friend while he was still young, and nobody did anything about it. No police, no therapy, no protection, just silence. Just another thing he had to carry by himself. School wasn't any safer either. By 3rd grade, he had already been moved through 4 different schools in a single year. No stability, no roots, no chance to feel normal. Teachers saw a troubled kid, but nobody stopped to ask why. Nobody stepped in. He just slipped through the cracks like so many others do. By the time he hit his late teens, that emptiness turned into something darker. In 2008, at just 19 years old, James had already climbed up the ranks of a local gang branch called the Bay C Street Crips in Lauderhill. He wasn't just around it, he was second in command. That became his family, that became his structure, and that structure ran on violence. Between June and December of that year, James and 3 others went on a brutal crime spree. It started with robberies, but it didn't stay there. It escalated fast. By the end of it, 2 people were dead. The first killing happened on November 14th, 2008. It was early morning, still dark out. James was riding around with 2 other gang members, not just cruising. They were hunting. They were in some twisted competition with each other, trying to see who could stack the most bodies. That's when they saw Eric Jean-Pierre. Eric was just a regular guy walking home from a bus stop. No gang ties, no drama, just trying to get home. The car rolled up next to him. The passenger lifted a shotgun out the window, and James, instead of stopping it, pushed it forward. He kept urging the shooter to fire. The trigger got pulled. Eric was hit in the chest at point-blank range. The blast ripped through his heart. He died right there on the street, and instead of panic or regret, the car sped off with laughter inside it. They joked about the sounds Eric made while he was dying. That's how far gone they were. 2 weeks later, it happened again. On November 27th, James and the same accomplice walked into a Dunkin' Donuts in Tamarack, Florida. Inside was Kim Hewen, a 58-year-old immigrant who had just spent Thanksgiving visiting his son. He stopped for a coffee. That was it. Wrong place. Wrong time. James held the room at gunpoint. Then, just to prove a point, he fired into Hewen's back. The robbery itself fell apart. They couldn't even get the register open. They ran out empty-handed, leaving Hewen bleeding on the floor. Hewen fought for 10 days in the hospital before dying from his injuries on December 7th. Those weren't the only attacks. They hit 3 other Dunkin' Donuts locations during that stretch. Plantation in June, Sunrise on November 24th, then Delray Beach on November 26th, the night before Hewen was shot. That Delray Beach robbery was especially brutal. Without any warning, the shooters opened fire on customers. One of them walked up to an 84-year-old World War II veteran named Henry Borenstein and shot him directly in the face. It shattered his jaw and teeth. Then they turned the gun on others in the store, hitting multiple people. As they ran, a driver across the street flashed his headlights. They shot him in the face too. People were getting hit for no reason at all. Even the police were rattled. They called it horrific, senseless, pure, trigger-happy violence. Elderly people already on the ground were still being shot anyway. And it wasn't random either. Investigators believe they targeted donut shops because they stayed open late and felt easy, low risk, soft targets. That's what made it so disturbing. They weren't just robbing places. They were hunting in spaces where people felt safe. And that's the real tragedy in all of this. But the law was already closing in. On December 5th, 2008, it's still dark outside. barely morning. At Port Everglades, a security aide named Celia Cromer is posted at the checkpoint doing a job most people never think twice about. Then a silver Honda rolls up, two women in the front, two men slouched low in the back, hoodies pulled tight, faces half hidden. But Celia doesn't need to see much. She recognizes them instantly from a wanted flyer she'd seen earlier. These weren't small-time thieves. These were the last two suspects from a violent donut shop robbery spree that stretched across 2 counties, a spree where 6 people had already been shot for no reason. When Celia asks for their names, the men don't even fake it. They give their real ones: Tharod Bell, Charles Faustin. Celia isn't armed. She's not a cop. She's just a service aide standing in front of a car full of dangerous people. Her heart is racing, but she doesn't freeze up. She locks eyes with a nearby deputy, Sal Verini, and gives him that look. The silent signal that something is wrong. Verini feels it immediately, but instead of rushing in wild, he plays it smooth, walks over, calm, starts talking, keeps his voice steady, keeps the tension low. He lets them think everything is normal. Then the moment hits. Verini draws his weapon and commands them to freeze. Hands up, don't move. Backup floods in seconds later. Just like that, the final 2 suspects of a violent 2-county crime spree are in cuffs. No chase, no shootout, just timing, instinct, and a calm move at the right second. What makes it crazier is what they were trying to do. Bell and Faustin were on their way to catch a cruise to the Bahamas. They thought they could just float away from everything. Except they didn't even have passports. And even if they made it, the Bahamas can extradite. There was never a real escape, just desperation. The 2 women in the car turned out to be their girlfriends. Police cleared them and let them go. This whole last-ditch escape was triggered by what had happened the day before. 3 other members of the crew had already been caught: Jonathan Jackson, James Herard, Calvin Weatherspoon. Their downfall started with a light-colored 4-door sedan caught on surveillance footage. Police later spotted a matching car during an unrelated patrol. Then things got stupid. The suspects pulled over and stole a pit bull right from its owner during a walk. That's when officers moved in. Jackson, Herard, and Weatherspoon were arrested right there. Even the police admitted part of it was luck. As the investigation unfolded, the real personalities started coming out. One of the Herard brothers stood out for all the wrong reasons. He wasn't just uncooperative, he was proud, arrogant, cold. He bragged that he could kill the investigators right there and feel nothing. He said he had no soul. 3 of the men confessed. All of them had some kind of criminal history already, some worse than others, but every single one admitted they were part of the Crips. Detectives started reopening old cases immediately, wondering how deep this really went. But outside the police station, the story sounded different. People who knew the suspects didn't see monsters. They saw sons, fathers, boyfriends, workers. Jackson's girlfriend said he had just had a baby and wanted to be there for his kids. His friend said he worked part-time and was focused on family. Herard's own mother admitted she barely saw her son anymore, said he was always with the wrong crowd, said he never listened to her. Someone nearby made a quiet comment that now he would have no choice but to listen. By January 7th, 2009, the hammer finally dropped. Herard, Weatherspoon, Bell, and Faustin were officially charged with armed robbery. Jackson was charged as an accomplice. Police made it clear that Bell was the shooter. Bell eventually broke down and confessed. 2 others confessed too. Herard didn't. He bragged instead. Soon after, murder charges were added for the death of Q Huyn, and more agencies started digging. Families were still grieving. Jean-Pierre's brother spoke about how kind and peaceful his brother was, how he never hurt anyone, how he died for nothing. By February, Herard, Bell, and Weatherspoon were sitting in jail waiting to be moved between counties for trial. When they finally entered court, the room felt heavy. Deputies lined the walls, more than 10 of them. The men stood surrounded. Faustin wasn't even brought in that day. Then the indictments came. Multiple counts, attempted murder, robbery. Even without clear victim IDs, the evidence stacked high, and Herard made it worse for himself. At his first appearance, he barked at the judge instead of answering. He confessed on a jail call within minutes of being locked up. He then asked to represent himself because he wanted to have fun. The judge shut that down fast. A stun belt was strapped under his clothes to keep him in line. Herard went quiet. He tried to walk things back, tried to say his mouth was the only thing connecting him to the crime. Then the witnesses came. Elderly people, survivors, victims who had to relive that night. One man described hiding under a table while gunfire exploded around him. Another described a shotgun blast tearing across his face, leaving his teeth hanging loose. He described asking why he had been shot. There was no answer then. There was no answer now. Just scars, just consequences, and a courtroom finally forcing the story to stop running. By July 29, 2011, the wait was finally over. The jury came back and found Herard guilty on 19 counts. Everything from robbery to attempted first-degree murder. And remember, this is the same dude who told police it was pretty watching people's faces get blown off. He really said seeing that kind of damage felt like sex to him. So when the verdict dropped, it felt like the air in the room finally shifted. Justice had caught up, and it caught up loud. You could feel the relief instantly. Doris Lakin, whose 75-year-old husband Gerald was one of the victims, could barely get the words out. All she said was thank God. Gerald wasn't celebrating though. He was still living inside the damage. The shots destroyed his face so badly that he still slurs his words to this day. From his home, he said he was happy Herard got what he deserved, but he was really waiting on sentencing. That was the part that mattered. The whole trial was a heavyweight moment. It was led by Chief Assistant State Attorney Jill Esty Richstone and State Attorney Michael McAuliffe, who hadn't even been in a courtroom since taking office in 2009. For him, this wasn't just a case. This was a return to the front line. And when it was over, even he admitted it felt good seeing justice actually land. On August 26, 2011, Judge Karen Miller didn't play with it. She handed James Herard 9 life sentences, 5 running back to back. That's the system saying you're done forever. But even that wasn't enough for Gerald Lakin. He stood in front of the judge with a towel wrapped around his neck, not for drama, but because the damage to his face causes him to constantly drool. That towel was part of his life now. He looked the judge straight in the eyes and said someone like Herard had no place in a free society. And right behind him, the man who shot him laughed. Herard actually laughed while Gerald was standing there broken in front of the court. Judge Miller didn't react. No emotion, no speech. She just kept it moving and locked him away for good. Afterward, Gerald summed it up simple. There's no fixing someone like that. And the part people forget is he has to live with this every single day. The judge didn't even address Herard when she spoke. She spoke to the victims. She told them she had nothing but empathy for their courage. That's who mattered. When closing statements came around, things got strange. Herard didn't look scared, didn't look regretful, didn't look like he cared at all. His lawyer even told the judge that Herard's emotional emptiness showed something was deeply wrong inside him. He tried to argue for a sentence that could one day let Herard walk free in his 70s. Herard didn't want it. He told the judge he didn't care what sentence he got. Then he said something that froze the room. He said he felt sorry for the victims, but if it wasn't them, it would have been someone else. That was all McAuliffe needed to hear. To him, that was proof that Herard didn't belong around people ever again. He told the court to stop focusing on the defendant and start focusing on the victims, especially Gerald Lakin, who refused to let the man who tried to kill him take the rest of his life too. By 2012, the rest of the crew started falling. Charles Faustin was convicted first. 3 attempted murder charges, armed robbery, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and the judge gave him 9 life sentences stacked on top of each other. Then came Therod Bell and Charles Weatherspoon. They were tried at the same time in the same courtroom, just with 2 separate juries. Bell was found guilty and got 7 life sentences. 2 days later, Weatherspoon was found guilty and also got 7 life sentences. By 2014, the whole thing had completely unraveled. The last 2 members folded. Jonathan Jackson and Calvin Weatherspoon both pleaded guilty. Jackson was handed 25 years. Calvin was already serving life, so the judge stacked on another 15, just to make sure he never saw daylight again. And for Herard, it only got worse. On top of everything else, he, Bell, and Faustin were hit with charges for 2 murders, Kim Huynh and Eric Jean-Pierre. Prosecutors came in swinging, pushing for the death penalty, but here's the twist. Only Herard actually went to trial. The others cut deals. Faustin pled to second-degree murder and got 40 years. Bell, even though he was the shooter in one of the killings, took a plea too and walked away with 50. On April 29th, 2014, Herard finally had to face it head on. That was the day he went on trial for the murders of Eric Jean-Pierre and Kim Huynh. And the whole case basically rested on one thing: his own mouth. Everything prosecutors had was built off what Herard told police during 2 long, exhausting days of interrogation right after he got picked up for something almost stupid compared to what was coming: stealing a pit bull. When detectives started pressing him about Eric Jean-Pierre's murder, Herard let something dark slip. He admitted that Therod Bell probably wouldn't have even pulled the trigger if Herard hadn't been right there beside him, pushing him, hyping him up, telling him to do it. That alone told the story. But the state didn't just run with his words. They backed it up. They tied him to the same 20-gauge shotgun used in both murders and multiple shootings. They tied him to a white Toyota Camry that kept popping up on cameras near the scenes. His story lined up with the evidence, and the evidence lined up with the damage. During opening statements, prosecutor Stephen Zakor kept it simple and heavy. Eric Jean-Pierre wasn't a target. He wasn't in a beef. He wasn't part of anything. He was just standing there. Wrong place, wrong time. They rolled past, pointed that shotgun straight at his chest, and ended his life on the pavement. No reason, no warning, no mercy. The defense tried to flip the whole thing. They said Herard didn't confess because he was guilty. He confessed because he was scared. His lawyers claimed detectives backed him into a corner after he mentioned another name, a gang figure tied to the robberies. According to them, Herard felt trapped. Say he did it and live with a lie, or name names and put himself and his family in danger. Either way, he felt like he was dead. So the defense painted his confession as panic, not truth, fear, not facts, pressure, not choice. Herard never took the stand himself. His lawyers tried to break the case apart piece by piece. They said his statements were inconsistent. They said they were unreliable. They said they were forced. They reminded the jury he was only 19 during those interrogations. They reminded them police never actually recovered the shotgun. Their whole angle was simple: no weapon, no DNA, no fingerprints, no science, just words. And scared words, in their view, don't equal guilt. Then came May 6, 2014, and that's when the courtroom turned into something else. Herard didn't just show up tense, he showed up ready to combust. He started snapping at his own lawyer, slamming the table, yelling, cursing, losing control right in front of the jury. The judge had to step in and warn him that if he didn't calm down, he'd be physically restrained. But it didn't stop there. When one witness finished testifying and his lawyer forgot to ask a simple question about an address, Herard completely lost it. Once the jury was escorted out, deputies rushed in and surrounded him like it was about to turn violent. Judge Paul Bachman shut it down. He told Herard straight up the trial was moving forward with or without him, and he warned him about the stun belt. That was enough. Herard went quiet and stayed that way. Then the real weight hit the room. 2 survivors from the 2008 Dunkin' Donuts robbery took the stand. First was Paul Barada. He walked in holding a cane. He told the jury he used to have perfect vision until he got shot while sitting in his car as the robbers were escaping. Now he's blind. Just like that, his whole life flipped. Then came Henry Bornstein. He rolled in a wheelchair, face visibly damaged. He told them he was shot twice in the chest and once in the face. The reason was simple and terrifying. He made eye contact. That was all it took. After that, prosecutors turned the spotlight back on Herard himself. They played interrogation footage where the jury could hear him talk through his role in the robberies. One moment in that video stuck with everyone. Herard pulled his shirt up over his head and face, showing detectives exactly how he disguised himself during the robberies. Not acting, not guessing, demonstrating. And in that moment, the story stopped being about theories or arguments or legal angles. It became about actions and a damage that couldn't be undone. On May 16, 2014, the hammer finally dropped. The jury came back and found Herard guilty on 18 counts: murder, attempted murder, robbery, aggravated battery, gang activity, all of it. He caught one not guilty on a single robbery charge, but that didn't change the weight of what just landed on him. 18 convictions is not a win in any universe, and getting there wasn't light work. The jury spent 19 hours locked in deliberations over 3 days. Before that, they sat through 7 full days of testimony. Even picking them was a grind. 5 straight weeks just to seat 12 jurors and 6 alternates. Once it was time to decide, they were cut off from the world, sealed in until they reached a verdict. When it was over, the prosecutors looked relieved, but not celebratory. They knew what kind of case this was. Heavy, ugly, draining. Defense wasn't mad either, see, just acknowledged the jury actually did the job and took the time to really think through it. But the case wasn't done, not even close. Now it was time for the penalty phase, the part where the system decides whether someone lives or dies. A new lawyer stepped in for that fight, trying to steer things away from death row and toward life without parole. The plan was to humanize Herard, bring in doctors, bring in family, show the jury a whole life instead of just a crime scene. 3 weeks later, the same jury was back in that same courthouse, now holding something way heavier than guilt in their hands. The state came in swinging, asking for the death penalty on both murders. The defense came right back with emotion, history, trauma, and hope, begging them not to end his life. And here's the twist. The judge could override a death recommendation if he wanted to. But if the jury chose life without parole, that decision was locked in. No override, no second guessing. That meant the real power was sitting in that jury box. The prosecution told them straight up this was exactly the type of case the death penalty was made for. No sugar, no softness, just that this was one of the worst of the worst. The sentencing hearing itself was tense from the jump. The judge asked Herard if he wanted to testify. He said no. The judge ran through routine questions, including whether he was under the influence of drugs. Herard said no, then flipped it and asked if the judge was the one on drugs. The room went quiet after that. The state kept its case simple. One witness, one detective, one interrogation tape. And that tape was rough. The jury heard Herard in his own voice talking about enjoying the violence. No edits, no spin, just him. The defense tried to pull him out of that box. They told the jury he wasn't some cartoon villain, that he wasn't the worst of the worst, that he was complicated, that he was damaged, that he was human. Then his family spoke, and they were shocked too. Shocked that he was even connected to something this ugly. They talked about the version of him they knew. Smart, polite, respectful. They apologized, they cried, they tried to save him. Right before closings, things got awkward. Herard came in wearing jail clothes and got mad he wasn't given a suit. He said he refused to look stupid. The judge sent him back to change. When he came back dressed properly, the court cleared out so he could talk to his family in private. Then the prosecution hit the jury with interrogation clips again, this time the darkest parts. Him describing himself switching into savage mode, him acting out shooting people, him saying the violence felt good, him saying it felt like sex. The state argued 3 things made this a death case. He had a violent history, the killing was planned and cold, and it was done as part of gang activity. The defense answered with mitigation. Doctors talked about his upbringing and the damage done to him growing up. Family talked about who he was before all this and who he could still be inside prison. They tried to tip the scale from execution to confinement. When the jury came back, they were split. For Eric Jean-Pierre's murder, they leaned toward death, 8-4. For Kim Huing's murder, they leaned toward life, 2 deaths, 2 different fates. Before the final sentence, Herard did something wild. He didn't beg, he didn't cry, he didn't ask for mercy. He basically dared the judge to sentence him to death. Said he was innocent anyway, so it wouldn't matter. Said he'd still sleep fine, eat fine, smile fine, said the courts would fix it later. He admitted he wasn't perfect, said he ran lights, said he had friends in gangs, said he wasn't a saint, but he drew the line at murder. He said he wasn't there, said he didn't kill anyone, said he wasn't a gang member. Later, his tone softened. He said he shouldn't be sent to death row because he was innocent. His lawyers backed that up with a legal argument. Fairness, proportionality. Because here's the part that hit different. The man who actually pulled the trigger, Tharod Bell, took a deal and got 50 years. Meanwhile, the state was asking to kill the man they said encouraged it. That's the fight now. Not about whether Herard is guilty. That already got decided. The fight is whether it makes sense to execute one man while the shooter himself is still alive behind bars. That's the line his lawyer is standing on, that the system can punish hard without crossing into something that doesn't add up, that justice still has to make sense, even when the case is ugly. And now, all that's left is a judge, a file stacked to the ceiling, and one decision that can't be undone. Herard's sentencing turned into a long, slow wait. It was supposed to happen in October 2014, then it got pushed, then pushed again until everybody finally ended up back in court on January 23rd, 2015, to hear the final word on the Jean-Pierre murder. Herard was only 24 by then. Sitting in court, he didn't look like a man about to lose his life. He looked relaxed, almost bored, like he was waiting on something small, not a death sentence. But the court wasn't playing with him at all. The judge made it clear from the start that Herard was wearing a stun belt under his clothes. One wrong move, one outburst, and he was getting dropped right there in the courtroom. When the judge broke it down legally, he said the decision wasn't even close. The state had 3 aggravating factors, and the court called them overwhelming. That was enough on its own to push this case into death penalty territory. Herard's team tried to save him with mitigation. They said he was emotionally disturbed, that he wasn't the main actor, that he was under pressure, that he was young, that his life had value. The judge didn't buy it. He acknowledged a bunch of personal details in Herard's favor, but said they didn't move the needle. The violence mattered more. The pattern mattered more. The damage mattered more. So the court followed the jury's recommendation. Death for Eric Jean-Pierre. Life without parole for Kiem Huynh. The judge took nearly an hour explaining why. While he talked, Herard leaned back in his chair, shook his head, made faces, almost like he couldn't believe this was really happening. But the judge wasn't guessing. He focused on one thing above all else: Herard's own confession. The part where Herard took responsibility. The part where he admitted pushing Bell to pull the trigger. The part where he said Bell wouldn't have done it without him standing there behind him. That's why Bell got 50 years and Herard got death. Not because Bell was innocent, but because Herard was the engine behind it all. And the court didn't stop there. It zoomed out. It looked at the pattern. A month before Jean-Pierre was killed, Herard had already shown exactly who he was. In Lauderhill, he led his crew into a confrontation with their rivals. When things popped off, he told one of his own guys, Keith Williams, to shoot. Williams refused, so Herard shot instead. The victim lived, but the message was clear, and the punishment for disobedience was worse. Herard and another leader tortured Williams, burning him with an iron, not to hide a crime, not to get information, just to make an example. Williams later testified. That's how the court even knew about it. And that's what the judge said was sitting in Bell's head the night of Jean-Pierre's murder. Bell didn't hear a suggestion. He heard a threat. He knew what happened to people who said no. So when Herard told him to shoot, Bell believed there was only one way that night ended. Either Jean-Pierre died or Bell did. That's why the court said Herard wasn't just involved. He was the pressure. He was the fear. He was the reason the trigger got pulled. After the sentence dropped, the defense promised to appeal immediately. Their argument was simple. It didn't make sense that the man who pulled the trigger got 50 years while the man who ordered it got death. But the judge had already answered that. Herard didn't just influence the crime, he created the conditions for it. He built the system, he enforced it with violence, and he used it to turn other people into weapons. The prosecutors didn't even need to talk. The judge's ruling sounded like their entire case, just spoken from the bench instead of the table. As deputies led Herard out in chains, the courtroom went silent. The only sound left was his mother crying in the back row, trying to hold herself up against the wall while watching her son disappear through the door. The court made it official. Herard was headed to death row. Then the law shifted. In 2016, the Supreme Court changed how death sentences worked in Florida, and Herard's case got swept into that wave of appeals. For a while, his fate was in limbo. But in July 2024, that door closed. The Florida Supreme Court rejected his appeal and upheld both his conviction and his death sentence. So that's where it stands. As of 2025, James Herard is still sitting on death row at Union Correctional Institution.